everybody. My name is Meagan Keane, and I'm part of the Pro Video team at Adobe. But my beginnings are actually in filmmaking. I went to film school and spent almost a decade as a documentary filmmaker. And what keeps me interested in the video industry is just how much it's constantly evolving. Most recently, the big topic is AI. But with these industry evolutions come the importance of the discourse, the conversations that are driving how we build this future. And that's why we're here today. So I am so excited to be joined by David Ma. Thank you, David, so much for joining us today. Why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about you, how you got started, and the work that you do?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. So I'm a self-taught director and filmmaker and social media content creator, which is a lot of slashes. But I got my start just by teaching myself. I was watching a lot of tutorials on YouTube, and that's actually why I create a lot of behind the scenes content now, is because when I was getting into this, I couldn't afford film school. I could barely afford a camera, and there weren't a lot of resources online. I felt that filmmaking and the Hollywood industry, when I got into this 6 years ago, was a very guarded, kind of secretive place. And in sharing my methods or the fails and the successes, I was able to, one, show people that, you can get into this industry from any background. It's just about wanting to tell your stories and having the desire to make that happen, but also forcing myself to re-innovate, not using the same trick for a practical effect twice. And sharing those methods and making that open and being transparent about the process was a way for me to teach myself and to evolve.
And then how did you evolve into more of the commercial work that you do now?
I started looking at it like it was places to learn. And coming from an agency background, I'd always worked with brands. I loved making branded stuff entertaining, like creating culture out of brand moments and things like that, which sounds very agency-esque, and I get it. I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid anymore, but I really do believe that it is such a challenge to take something that people want to skip and to mute or whatever it is and get them to actually talk about it or to feel something. I feel like if you can do that with the brand, making things for narrative should be somewhat in that wheelhouse, I guess. But I was really inspired to create online just because the reach of having people see my work without being an established name was really interesting and scary at the same time, because you have to be so transparent and vulnerable with your creative process and who you are as an artist. And taking that step and being able to do those things makes things like this not very scary, because we're just having a conversation about stuff together. And when you're putting stuff out to millions of people online, it just makes you really care about the work. And I liked having an audience, and it kept me accountable a bit.
And how much do you feel like your ability to find an audience through the content that you're creating has really helped your career grow?
I think it's been a massive part of the growth. The idea that someone could see my work on TikTok or on Instagram and, we should hire that guy to do something, or we really love what you do. Can we collaborate on something? Even if it's not a brand, if it's another creator. It's been the way that I found some of my best collaborators, whether they've been actors, writers, directors. I mean, I've just met so many talented people just by knowing that they exist. And I think that's kind of the game when you're playing social media, is just reminding people that I'm here and this is the one specific thing that I do.
It's interesting because you talk about, it's almost like the trends, right? Right. Keeping up with the trends, keeping up with what people are talking about, which leads really well into the topic of the day, AI. How is AI coming into play in what you're doing? How have you already started to incorporate it into your work?
It's been a very interesting additional tool to my workflow. There's been some trepidation, of course, myself and everyone else, we're all wondering. But currently, it's been really helpful with designing treatments for me. And also, I'm not the best artist. My sketches look pretty 5-year-old. So to be able to use AI in that sense to communicate my ideas, but still keeping those ideas as my own, has been a really helpful tool, just in terms of expressing and articulating the idea and finding the faster efficiencies within that.
Interesting. So it's less about the creative ideation and more the creative communication of what's already sort of going around.
Absolutely. And I think you can relate to this as a filmmaker. Our job and as a director is to bring everyone else on board with what we see in our head and articulating that in the clearest way possible.
Yeah. So on the topic of trends, what do you see as the trends that you're excited about in the near future, a little bit further down the line?
I like the possibility of efficiency without sacrificing a creator's voice. And I think that that's a really hard thing that I've encountered as a content creator and as a director myself. When there's such an influx of work, when is there time to create content in order to scale and to be able to do more of the job that I really enjoy doing. I'm really excited about the efficiencies, but I also don't want to remove the people who have been so key to the signature of my work.
Where are some of the biggest places where you feel like efficiency could really be built in, or AI could really be helping solve some of those pain points?
On the smallest level, I think as a content creator, if we're talking there, the idea that I could get 3 different edits that learns from the way that my videos are edited, the pacing, the cadence, even the way that I use hooks or the visual imagery that I use to stop someone in their feed. If that was something that could feel pretty close and just a few tweaks of, trimming some clips or, making some things, that would help a lot, I think, for a lot of content creators out there.
And that's key, right? Because like your style, the way that you pace things, the way that you is key to you being the person that people are turning to.
It's absolutely that DNA aspect of it, right? And you want to evolve that, but you also want to maintain the secret sauce or whatever it is that people know you for. And I think on the ideation level, I think a lot of filmmakers can relate to feeling siloed in the process. Oftentimes it's so much of like, hold myself up in a room, think, write, draw. And it can be a very singular process until you get to the stage of having collaboration with your art department, with your costume, your hair and makeup, all the talented people on set. But I really love the fact that, I don't know if it's possible now, but to have a concepting partner, and if it's through ChatGPT or whatever the thing is. And not so much of like, hey, figure out the idea for me. But if I'm trying to think of pop culture references and I can't think of 3, but I'm trying to get 5 ideas and I can only get 3, I can't crack the other 2. Maybe, there's a way for that to be filled in or to riff and bounce a little bit.
Right. Like you have the idea and then it's like, well, you could go one of 4 ways.
Help me extrapolate that idea.
Totally. Right. Yeah, I like that.
When I was an agency creative director, my favorite role was having ideas brought to me and shaping those ideas and keeping it on that North Star or whatever the creative campaign idea was. And I look at AI similarly to that in the sense that, there's moderation, there's customization, and every idea needs that molding, that shaping, and that human touch that comes in. The baseline can be there, but for it to truly connect and resonate, I think that there needs to be that artist behind the wheel, or at least just kind of overseeing stuff.
What it makes me think of is like, how often do you get an idea for a creative project, like right as you're starting to fall asleep or right as you're waking up in the morning, that like thing that it's not like the whole idea, but it's like this spark of the idea
it's like
that,
the nugget, right?
that then you grow and sort of evolve. That's really interesting. As you think about AI's development and sort of how fast, we've already said how fast things are going. What is the importance of responsibility of how we're innovating in this AI space and how the industry either embraces it or really questions how we're implementing it?
It's a good question. I think there's no ignoring it. And I think ignoring it feels very antiquated approach of thinking. We've seen this with the film industry, that there are evolutions in tape versus digital and loaders and all this stuff. I have so much respect for what goes into a production, having been in the industry now, that I see the value of all these people and the jobs that they fulfill. I also see where these inefficiencies could be improved. Not necessarily taking those people out of the job, but making their processes easier and making the workflow and communication streams easier. I don't know how you mitigate the line for what's too far or what's not, but anytime there are ways for people to communicate better and to work more effectively on set, I think is a beautiful thing, not just for the clients, but for the artists involved. We don't have much time on set to capture what we need to do. And sometimes we have these ambitious scenes that require a lot of planning and a lot of imagination. And the more I can clearly articulate that imaginative idea, the better the end result's going to be, because everybody's on the same page. Everyone's working towards that same construct.
Yeah, I think anybody who works in this industry can relate that, like, you get into it for the creative passion of it.
Yes.
And there's so much that you're doing that is not that at all.
There's so many frustrations and processes that you go through. And you're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like the meme that I always think of is that, like, if AI could just do my laundry and mow the lawn and put away the dishes, like, that's where we're trying to solve, is those pieces of filmmaking that are actually, like, nobody really wants to do.
Right, right.
And hopefully get those positions back to being more intrinsically creative versus a lot of how some roles in the film industry have evolved.
Yes, you're right. Like returning to that essence of giving more of your time to the creative stuff and leaving the procedural things to automation, maybe.
Procedural. I love that word. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to young creators, young editors who are just starting out and sort of how they approach, whether they embrace AI, learn about like what would your advice be?
I would actually like to talk about one of the editors I work with currently. His name is Jonah. We've done a lot of work together of TVCs and social bits of content. And he was actually the one to really turn me on to AI and the possibilities of it. We did a TikTok for Burger King at one point, and we used AI to create these flat images in Photoshop that we then brought into After Effects and rendered into this like 3D room environment. And the production value was incredible. It's nothing we could have ever afforded, you know, with the budget that we had for that specific project, but it was like the sandbox was wide, much bigger now. We were in space on an alien spaceship that had cool production design. And I was able to shape a lot of the unique elements that I wanted to make them feel right for the world that we were in. It took some steps to get there, but I was really into that process. And I would just say that anyone who is coming up as a filmmaker, to get back to your question, the more you can understand these tools and integrate them into your practical workflow, the more versatile you're going to be. And with budgets being the way they are, some small, some big, some in the middle, any efficiencies that you can have make you a more valuable asset to the production and to the director.
Totally. It's like a resume builder if you're somebody
really
who
is.
really knows the AI tools.
Prompts and
Totally.
working within that and how to take the traditional workflow, but then integrate a lot of these new methods. It combines the best of old and new.
Totally.
And that's where the sweet spot is, I think. It's like when CGI and VFX came around, like that was so cool, right? But you still had like Star Wars Empire Strikes Back, where there were miniatures being built. And I think of the first Ghostbusters movie with the Marshmallow Man, like just, you know, they built miniatures to make everything happen. And I think the best blend of that is when you've got practical elements with VFX and CGI. You even look at Christopher Nolan's films, like, yes, he goes practical with everything, but there's VFX cleanup, there's VFX enhancement.
Yeah.
And I think that's my sweet spot of where I like to be. And I look at AI very similar, where we're going to integrate some methods that are going to help us focus more on the creative, but ultimately we're doing as much as we can with people and practicality.
I know that you do incorporate a lot of AI, but you also do a lot of those practical choices. How do you make those decisions, or how are you sort of approaching, you know, which way you go?
There's a safety that I have and a trust in the people that I know who build these amazing rigs, who fabricate these incredible puppets or, you know, giant whatevers that we need in these commercials and videos. I just have a trust there. I guess it's more of a preference more than anything else. And I'm a huge movie buff, so when I hear about productions like Alien Romulus still putting a live actor in an alien suit, I love that stuff. Of course, like they're going to spray acid with CGI and everything else, but there's that practicality, there's a love for it. And I do a lot of behind the scenes on my social media, so I love teaching about practical methods. And we've actually started integrating some of the AI language into, AI, like where we're using AI, just to be transparent about it for one, but also to show that there's a world where these two can live together, one and the same, at least at this stage right now. And I think it's up to every filmmaker. Like if the production approach is to integrate AI and not just make it an AI thing, then I would hope that the brands that we're doing commercials for would trust us as the production entity to make those calls. Yeah,
so that was actually going to be my next question is what education do you think is needed for creatives, for brands, for audiences to understand, you know, as AI is more and more incorporated into filmmaking?
I think at this stage, brands need to be wary of how much they use AI, because I've seen a couple examples just from brands that have made some AI commercials and Sora and all these things. And there's a bit of growing pains, as with anything, the first gen of anything. I guess the advice would be to, once again, just not fully rely on anything new as the route, but instead like bake it in, you know, work it into the processes where we can find those efficiencies.
It sounds like your perspective is AI for efficiencies, humans for the creative touch.
Yeah, at least for now. And I think that even if the technology evolves, I'd still look at it more like a collaboration than just handing over the keys.
What's lost if the keys are completely handed over to AI, complete AI
Sure.
workflows?
The dangers in handing the keys completely over is that we start to just rely on it. And it becomes like human nature just to let AI make the decision. Whether that's doing your laundry or the next car commercial or the next film, there is uniqueness in every filmmaker. Everyone has a unique story. Everyone has a perspective on life. And algorithms can't always pick up on that stuff. The nuance and like human condition, and it depends what kind of film you're making, obviously, but I still believe that even with a big budget action movie, you still need a little bit of story. You still need to have those core emotions that people can relate to. I mean, if it's just big explosions and, 360 shots of robots and, lasers, it loses that kind of narrative. And I'm not trying to be on a pedestal or anything talking about filmmaking, because I love every kind of movie, from the commercial ones to the indies and everything in between. But when it becomes just automated, algorithms will pull whatever's current in society, and that's not always the best reflection of where we want for society. And I truly believe that filmmaking, TV, all of these mediums, even social media posts, they will dictate a lot of how the public views the world, how people coming up in the world will, like, their impression of what the world is like. And if we pass that off to fully automation, it's kind of a disservice to the next generation of artists and to the current generation of viewers.
Yeah, like the growth in genre has been a product of somebody going a little bit off the normal path, and then something new grows out of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
We wouldn't have horror rom-coms if they didn't.
Exactly. Or what, like spaghetti westerns?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like that sort of uniqueness of the human perspective is what takes evolution of creativity in a different way than just regurgitating what has come before.
Absolutely. And I would say even just, we live in a world on social media of trends where that is the norm, to take something that's already existing, an idea that's already out there, and continue that culture. I love the idea that as human beings, you can help shape the culture and you can create the culture versus hopping onto the bandwagon or jumping into something someone's already done before. And I think that when you give people the option of stay up for another 3 hours and think of something amazing, or type the prompt in and get something, a lot of people will choose the latter.
Yeah.
And it's not a knock on their integrity or anything. It's just how human nature is.
So how do creatives find that balance between controlling the quality of an output and cost efficiencies, but still keeping that human touch?
That is a good question.
Hard-hitting question.
That's a hard one, yeah. I kind of look at it a little bit like the way a lot of filmmakers choose to work in making their work known. And by that, I mean, there are filmmakers who love the big studio system and working into that machine and, making those films that get seen by everybody. And then you also have indie filmmakers who are like, I don't like the system and I want to tell my own story and do that. And it's kind of a personal call, really. It's like, how comfortable are you with trying new technologies and taking risks with things? And do you have the bandwidth to do that with your clients or with your own film or with the studio that you're working with? As far as the balance goes, I mean, the way I would approach it personally is like, am I eliminating the people that have been so core to my success? And what does that look like when I remove one person from the equation or an entire department from the equation? And is that a risk that I'm willing to take? I still don't have that answer. But, once again, I'm slowly integrating it into the processes with my sound designer, with my production designer, and even gauging from them, like, was that helpful? Did you feel like that made things easier? Or was it just, I really listen to the people on the ground, because those are the people that I owe all my work to. They are the ones who are making the things in my head come to life. And I have a lot of respect for what they do.
So as you're talking about the efficiencies that can be built in with AI, what does purpose-built AI mean for you in video?
I think that's a loaded one, because a purpose-driven AI could be replace editors, right? And that's not somewhere I want to be. But in terms of when it's hyper-specific to the job, like, I mean, even in Premiere, I'm like, I love speech to text because that's something that saves time, but it's not a creative task necessarily. It's just something that helps my editor spend more time on editing and less time typing out captions or trying to figure out what was said. When the purpose is for a task and not a vocation, that is kind of my line if I had to like summarize it.
Yeah. Are you having a lot of these conversations with your peers, and sort of what is the overall feeling about AI in the industry?
Yeah, I guess it depends on which circle of peers we're talking about. The filmmaking community is pretty, I would say the older generation of filmmakers isn't really happy about it. I think when I've talked to some Gen Z filmmakers and whatever's between Gen Z and millennial, that they're more open to it. I think that there's a fear and a lot of hesitation. Maybe not a fear, but there's some going in with some guard to AI. Skepticism, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great way to phrase that. And with brands, it's a mixed bag. Some of them are taking a stance of like anti-AI. Like I saw a beautiful Dove ad this year at Cannes that was really well done, that spoke about AI and the dangers of AI, but not in a way that was fear-mongering. It was more about like beauty and the way we perceive ourselves. So it was very in line with the work they've been doing.
Right, their brand.
Their brand of,
totally.
Right. And then when I look at agencies and my creative director friends, they're looking at it like another tool. And, you know, whether it's coming from the top or their producers or whatever it is, I think all agency creatives are aware that the budgets are fewer and far between for larger scale things. And we're having to share, you know, a TVC budget and chop that up amongst social and activations and things like that for some of the jobs that we do. So any way that they're able to, and much like the filmmakers, agency creatives want to maintain their voice too. You know, there's a very real fear that brands could just take it in-house and just run it all themselves and consult themselves. Do I think that's the smartest move at this stage? No, I don't agree with that. But I think that everyone who touches a creative point in a film, in a commercial, in any kind of creative project is having a little bit of trepidation with it. That's the sense that I have. But the ones who are really leaning into it view it as, I'm going to be the pioneer in this. I'm going to be at the forefront. And I've had so many discussions with other social media creators, with other filmmakers, where they're like, this is going to be the future. So I'm getting on it right now. And I'm more in the camp of like, when it makes sense for my projects, I will integrate it. Or if someone wants to tell me about it, I'll always have a conversation about it. And I think that's what you guys are doing here, right? Is like taking some temperature, seeing where things are, and everyone's got a different take on it and different experiences with AI.
I love that, the perception of like AI could be your superpower.
Yes.
I also love hearing from you that like, I think it's really important for people in power, director, producer, to say, we value the creative, and because of that, we are going to make certain choices, or we're going to draw a hard line on certain things to protect those creatives as we're, building our budgets, writing our pitches.
Absolutely. And protecting the creative can mean integrating AI, because it means that you're not going to lose that account because you're able to work within the new efficiencies or whatever they need. How much you do, of course, is that line that we spoke about. But if you're not integrating AI, it could be more harmful too.
Right. And you can turn it quicker. You can deliver faster.
Yeah.
Totally.
No one wants to look antiquated, and no one also wants to look like a fool who's trying to force, a circle into a square peg at the same time.
You're absolutely right. That is why we're here today. It's these conversations that are really driving how we're making decisions, both the filmmakers, the video creators that are using this tech, but also the technology companies, and sort of what is important. How do we build this future together? Thank you so much for being here with us today. I really appreciate you taking the time. And thank you for watching. You are also part of the conversation. So let us know what you think. Add comments. What did this conversation today with David spark for you? And stay tuned for more.